From the wheelhouse of one of the large carriers, the captain was about to address the crew.
This is the captain speaking. Early this morning, the enemy attacked our NATO allies. Our country is at war as of this moment, and we are in the front lines. All of you have been trained in what you're supposed to do, and I have every confidence that you will do it.
Condition 1 has been put into effect on all carriers of the task force. 24 fighters of the Combat Air Patrol have been over the force since first light. 48 planes make up the first strike group. Their mission is to help our allies stop the communist advance in the battle area. The second strike group is made up of heavy attack aircraft carrying nuclear weapons and conventional bombs. Their objectives are enemy airfields, reserve and supply areas, communication and transportation facilities. They have sufficient range to reach inside enemy-held territory. Since first light, anti-submarine aircraft have been airborne. The effectiveness of their search, plus the high speed of the task force, make enemy submarines a secondary threat. About mid-morning, radar picked up the first bogies. The range was 125 miles, Angels 30. The course of this group indicated that they had not spotted us, or else they were headed for another target. From the size of some of the pips, CIC evaluated the bogies to be long-range heavy bombers with fighter escort. Was it possible that the enemy intended to use horizontal bombers against naval units? The 24 fighters of the CAP were vectored out to intercept the bogies, while each carrier launched all available aircraft. The formations were changed slightly to put the guided missile ships in a better position to use their AA missiles should some of the enemy bombers slip through the CAP and try to attack the carriers. Task force fighters tally-hoed with the bandits at 110 miles. Although 80% of the enemy aircraft were destroyed by task force fighters, a few bombers slipped through. The guided missile ships launched their deadly AA missiles. They score on 2 enemy bombers. The other 3 continue closing the task force. The pursuing fighters are ordered to abort their attack. The ships of the task force open up with every piece of anti-aircraft defense equipment they have. One bomber is destroyed. Although controversies still rage over the vulnerability of surface ships to air attacks, hitting a maneuvering target moving through the water at better than 3,000 feet per minute from a horizontal bomber 6 miles above it moving at 40,000 feet per minute is highly improbable. Each enemy bomber dropped 1 bomb. Even with the best bomb sight in the world, an expert crew cannot consistently place a bomb closer than 3,000 feet to a stationary target. Both bombs produced nuclear explosions well astern of the formation. One destroyer received some radioactive fallout. Washdown procedures flushed the radioactive particles into the sea while the ship steamed out of the fallout area. Guided missiles from an interceptor destroyed one of the two bombers. The other flew into the path of a carrier strike group returning from a raid on enemy airfields. With the return of the interceptors involved in repelling the enemy air attack, recovery began of some of the 250 airborne aircraft. By 1300, reports on the results of early morning strikes began coming in. In the battle area, air supremacy achieved by versatile carrier-based aircraft had succeeded in stalling the communist land attack. One result of carrier strikes on airfields inside enemy territory was a false announcement that U.S. bombers had dropped nuclear super bombs on civilian populations. Over 1 million non-combatants, including women and children, according to the communists, had been killed. Photographs by naval reconnaissance planes proved this report another bold-faced lie. Only military targets had been devastated by nuclear bombs, precision dropped by carrier-based aircraft. After 24 hours of war, United States intercontinental bombers carrying nuclear super bombs were still airborne over friendly territory. That afternoon, additional carrier-based heavy attack groups were launched to hit other enemy airfields and military installations. Strike groups for around-the-clock close support of Allied counterattacks in the battle area were launched until well over 200 aircraft were in position to put decisive pressure on enemy defenses. All pilots were warned to watch for friendly submarines. Late in the afternoon, a carrier-based anti-submarine plane made contact with an enemy submarine and attacked with homing torpedoes. U.S. Navy seaplanes were carrying out search and reconnaissance missions. 8 hours later, task forced in a northerly direction at flank speed. In addition to launching aircraft for strikes on targets inside enemy territory, more than 150 bombers and fighters were launched to soften up the invasion beaches for amphibious landings at dawn on the third day. Enemy air raids increased in intensity throughout the day. In spite of the failure of their first attack, the communists continued to use horizontal bombers. In each successive attack, they came in at lower altitudes to increase their bombing accuracy. This tactic also increased the accuracy of surface-to-air guided missiles and AA guns. Later in the day, small groups of dive bombers began attacking. 3 ships were hit, one by a suicide plane carrying a conventional bomb. Throughout all operations, the ships remained sufficiently dispersed to make the use of high-yield nuclear bombs impractical. Increasing pressure on the enemy could bring about such an attack. During the night, the task force turned east, hoping to find a few hours respite from the terrific activity of the past 2 days. Night fighters were on station to intercept any enemy snoopers. Op orders for the third day included a warning to all carrier pilots engaged in long-range strikes to expect U.S. intercontinental bombers to be over military targets with conventional and small-yield nuclear bombs. Some intercontinental bombers loaded with nuclear super bombs were kept on standby in the United States to act as continuing deterrents in preventing the aggressors, and thus ourselves, from attempting mass annihilation. Others were deployed to European airfields to be used as practicable to further the war effort. At 04:30 on the third day, CIC reported a single bogey at a range of 200 miles, speed 1,100 knots. Shortly thereafter, a moderate nuclear explosion occurred 20 miles away from the task force. Based partly on previous long-range jet seaplane sightings of Soviet cruisers, the bogey was evaluated as a fleet-launched guided missile. No decision was made as to its intended target. What the missile did do was locate enemy fleet units. A decision was made to launch the guided missiles carried on our cruisers. Guidance planes were launched immediately to accompany the missiles. The cruisers launched their missiles at close intervals. Each guidance plane controlled one missile, changing its course by radio signals. The guidance plane gained altitude. 10 miles from land, 4 enemy cruisers were spotted. The leading guidance pilot put his missile in a dive. Corrections in dive angle and course were made as necessary. The first missile scored a direct hit. The second missile also scored a hit. Results of the third and fourth missiles could not be observed. On the third day, carrier plane strikes on the invasion beaches reached full intensity. Cruisers and destroyers shelled the area with hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Carrier aircraft kept up continuous attacks on enemy supply and communication facilities. The amphibious assault ships arrived on schedule. At 0 hour, the helicopters cleared the assault ship decks to carry out a vertical envelopment. The landing craft started for the beach. Marine squadron aircraft, manned by pilots well trained in precise, close air support of marine operations, took station to be available for immediate use. At the beginning of the third day of war, Allied authorities felt that the prompt application of naval power, spearheaded and implemented by the world's most flexible and mobile air power, would prove decisive in saving the Middle East and the Mediterranean from communist domination. No other type of military force could have been brought to bear on the enemy so decisively in such a short time.